April 15th, 1943. 25,000 feet above the Ruhr Valley. Hauptmann Wilhelm Herget watched through his canopy as two peculiar aircraft climbed toward his formation of Fokker-Wulf 180s. The twin-boomed silhouettes looked ungainly, almost experimental, like someone had forgotten how to design a proper fighter. He keyed his radio, unable to suppress the contempt in his voice. "The Americans send us their spare parts," he transmitted to his wingman. "Two fuselages and they forgot the middle." His squadron mates laughed. Below them, two P-38F Lightnings of the 1st Fighter Group continued their climb, their twin Allison V-1710 engines driving counter-rotating propellers through the thin air. To German pilots accustomed to conventional single-engine fighters, these American machines appeared cobbled together, asymmetric, vulnerable. What Herget couldn't know, what none of the Luftwaffe veterans circling above could have imagined, was that they were looking at the aircraft that would revolutionize fighter tactics and introduce a new concept to aerial warfare, coordinated pair hunting that would turn the skies over Europe into a killing ground for German pilots. The twin-boom fighter that German pilots mocked in early 1943 would become known as the Fork-tailed Devil, an aircraft so feared that Luftwaffe intelligence devoted entire sections to tracking its movements and developing counter-tactics. Within 18 months, the sight of those distinctive twin booms would trigger immediate panic among German formations. The mathematics of the P-38's lethality were already loaded in that distinctive nose: one 20mm Hispano cannon with 150 rounds, 4 Browning M2 machine guns with 500 rounds each, all 5 weapons mounted in the nose, firing through the propeller arc without synchronization losses, no convergence problems, no bullet scatter. Just a cone of destruction that extended from point-blank range to 1,000 yards. But it wasn't just the firepower that made the Lightning lethal. It was how American pilots learned to use them, in pairs, always in pairs, hunting, covering, killing with a coordination that German pilots, trained in the individual ace tradition, couldn't counter. This is the story of how American industrial innovation and tactical evolution transformed an aircraft that German pilots initially dismissed into the weapon that decimated the Luftwaffe's most experienced pilots. How coordinated team tactics defeated individual brilliance, and how German mockery turned to terror when they realized that the fork-tailed devil never hunted alone. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning emerged from a 1937 Army Air Corps specification that seemed impossible. They wanted an interceptor capable of 360 miles per hour at 20,000 feet, with an endurance of 1 hour at full throttle. At a time when the fastest American fighter could barely reach 300 miles per hour, this requirement seemed fantastical. Clarence Kelly Johnson, a 27-year-old engineer at Lockheed, designed something radical. Unable to find a single engine powerful enough to meet the specifications, he used 2. But instead of a conventional twin-engine design with engines in the wings, Johnson placed them in streamlined nacelles at the end of twin booms. The pilot sat in a central nacelle between them, with all armament concentrated in the nose. The configuration was aerodynamically brilliant but visually bizarre. The XP-38 prototype that first flew on January 27, 1939, shocked everyone who saw it. It looked like nothing else in the sky. The twin booms gave it a science fiction appearance. The tricycle landing gear was revolutionary for fighters. The counter-rotating propellers eliminated torque, making takeoffs and landings smoother than any single-engine fighter. But it was fast, blindingly fast. During a transcontinental speed dash in February 1939, the prototype reached 420 miles per hour at altitude before crashing on landing in New York due to pilot error. Even in wreckage, the performance had been proven. Production P-38s entered service in 1941, but early models had serious problems. The engines overheated. The cockpit was cramped and uncomfortable. The counter-rotating propellers, while eliminating torque, added mechanical complexity. Most critically, at high altitude, the aircraft suffered from compressibility problems. In steep dives, the controls would lock up as shock waves formed on the wing surfaces. Pilots called it tucking under, and it killed several experienced aviators before the phenomenon was understood. Lieutenant Colonel Cass Hu, commanding the 1st Fighter Group during training in California, lost 4 pilots to compressibility in the first 6 months of operations. One pilot, attempting to intercept a high-altitude target, entered a dive at 30,000 feet and couldn't pull out. His aircraft bored into the desert floor at over 500 miles per hour, the impact crater 30 feet deep. The investigation revealed that at speeds above 500 miles per hour, air flowing over the Lightning's wing became supersonic in places, creating shock waves that disrupted control surface effectiveness. The solution, dive flaps that deployed automatically to limit speed, wouldn't arrive until late 1943. Early P-38 pilots had to learn their aircraft's limits through brutal trial and error. But those who mastered the Lightning discovered something extraordinary. In the hands of a skilled pilot, the P-38 was the most versatile fighter in the American arsenal. It could outclimb, outdive, and out-accelerate anything the Luftwaffe flew at altitude. The twin engines provided redundancy. Lose one engine and the Lightning could still make it home. Try that in a single-engine fighter and you were walking. Major Jack Jenkins, who would later command the 55th Fighter Squadron, described his first flight. It was like strapping into a hot rod with wings. The acceleration was phenomenal, both engines spooling up together, 3,000 horsepower driving you forward. You weren't just flying, you were commanding the sky. And those guns, all in the nose, no convergence to worry about. Point and shoot. Anywhere from 100 yards to half a mile, if you could see it, you could hit it. The first P-38s arrived in England in July 1942, assigned to the 1st and 14th Fighter Groups. British pilots, flying Spitfires and Hurricanes, were sceptical. The Lightning was massive compared to their nimble fighters. It weighed 17,500 pounds fully loaded, nearly twice the weight of a Spitfire. American pilots themselves were uncertain. The P-38's size and twin-engine configuration made it feel more like flying a light bomber than a fighter. German intelligence first documented the Lightning in August 1942. Initial assessments were dismissive. The twin-engine configuration was seen as a liability. German pilots believed the aircraft would be sluggish and unmaneuverable. Reports to Luftwaffe Command described it as a reconnaissance aircraft with fighter pretensions, not a serious combat threat. This assessment would prove catastrophically wrong, but it would take German blood to correct it. The early combat encounters seemed to confirm German prejudices. In August and September 1942, P-38s flew bomber escort missions, but seldom engaged German fighters aggressively. The American pilots, still learning their aircraft and working with primitive tactics, were cautious. They stayed close to the bombers, reactive rather than proactive. Luftwaffe pilots attacking bomber formations found the Lightnings curious, but not particularly threatening. Oberleutnant Egon Meyer, commanding officer of Jägergeschwader II, encountered P-38s for the first time on September 3, 1942, during a raid on Rouen. His report to headquarters was condescending. The American twin-engine fighter is interesting but impractical. Large target area, presumably poor maneuverability. Our pilots report no difficulty evading them. Standard tactics appear effective. The assessment underestimated both the aircraft and the pilots flying them. What German intelligence failed to grasp was that American pilots were developing entirely new tactics specifically designed around the P-38's unique characteristics. The transformation began in October 1942 when Major Tommy Lynch, a former Flying Tigers pilot with combat experience in China, arrived to command the 39th Fighter Squadron. Lynch brought with him tactical concepts learned fighting Japanese Zeros, lessons that would revolutionize P-38 operations. Lynch recognized immediately that trying to dogfight in a P-38 was suicide. The aircraft was too heavy, too large. But he also recognized what the Lightning could do that no single-engine fighter could match. It could outzoom anything in the sky. The twin engines and excellent high-altitude performance meant a P-38 could climb faster above 20,000 feet than any German fighter. It could dive faster than anything except perhaps a P-47. And its firepower, concentrated in the nose, was unmatched. Lynch's tactical breakthrough was simple but revolutionary. P-38s would never fight alone. They would always operate in pairs, with each aircraft covering its partner. One Lightning would engage, drawing enemy attention. The second would position above and behind, ready to pounce on any German fighter that committed to the first Lightning. The Germans called it the ambush tactic, but American pilots simply called it mutual support. The first successful execution of this tactic occurred on November 23, 1942, over Saint-Omer. Second Lieutenant Jack Ilfrey and his wingman, Lieutenant Sam Junkin, encountered 4 Focke-Wulf 190s positioning to attack a B-17 formation. Ilfrey, following Lynch's instructions, deliberately positioned his Lightning as bait, flying straight and level at 24,000 feet. The German leader, seeing what appeared to be an isolated American fighter, dove to attack. The Focke-Wulf, faster in the dive, closed rapidly. Ilfrey waited until the German opened fire at 600 yards, then broke hard right and pulled up. The Focke-Wulf, committed to the attack, followed. He never saw Junkin's Lightning diving from 26,000 feet at full throttle. Junkin opened fire at 400 yards, 30-degree deflection. The combined firepower of one 20mm cannon and 4 50-caliber machine guns, firing from the nose, created a stream of destruction that intersected the Focke-Wulf's flight path. Hauptmann Wilhelm Galland, younger brother of the famous Adolf Galland and leader of the German flight, died instantly as cannon shells tore through his cockpit. His Focke-Wulf 190, structural integrity destroyed, broke apart at 18,000 feet. The remaining German pilots, realizing they'd flown into a trap, disengaged immediately. The lesson was transmitted to Luftwaffe command within hours. The American twin-engine fighters hunt in pairs. Do not engage isolated Lightnings. They are never alone. But lessons learned through intelligence reports carry less weight than lessons learned through experience, and German pilots continued to fall into the trap. By January 1943, P-38 squadrons were refining the paired hunting technique into a science. The tactical manual developed by the 1st Fighter Group specified exact positioning. The lead Lightning would fly slightly below and ahead. The wingman would position 1,000 feet higher and 500 feet behind, scanning the lead's 6 o'clock position constantly. If an enemy fighter attacked the lead, the wingman would have both altitude and position advantage. If the lead engaged a target, the wingman provided cover and would take any kill the lead missed. The Germans, watching these tactics evolve, began to develop deep respect for Lightning formations. But isolated Lightnings were still considered vulnerable, and German pilots actively sought them. They were about to discover why American pilots always flew in pairs, and what happened to those who attacked a seemingly isolated Lightning. The revelation came on March 2, 1943, over Brest. Oberfeldwebel Franz Stigler, a veteran pilot with 12 kills, spotted a single P-38 flying at 22,000 feet, apparently separated from its formation. Stigler, flying a Messerschmitt Bf 109 G6, had altitude advantage and positioned for a classic bounce from above and behind. He dove, building speed to 450 miles per hour, lined up the distinctive twin booms in his reflector sight, and opened fire at 300 yards. His cannon shells and machine gun bullets stitched across the Lightning's left boom and wing. Good hits, visible damage. The Lightning rolled right and dove, trailing smoke. Stigler followed, preparing to finish the kill. He never saw the second Lightning. Lieutenant Bob O'Keen had been flying 3,000 feet above his partner, Lieutenant Ray Crawford, deliberately invisible against the bright sky. When Stigler committed to his attack on Crawford's Lightning, Akin rolled inverted and pulled through, diving at full throttle. The twin Allison engines, screaming at maximum power, drove the Lightning to 500 miles per hour in seconds. Akin opened fire at 600 yards while still in the dive, walking his fire into the Messerschmitt's flight path. Stigler, focused on his target, saw the tracers flash past his canopy and broke hard left. Too late. 20mm cannon shells exploded across the Messerschmitt's engine and cockpit. The German fighter, engine destroyed and pilot wounded, nosed over and fell. Stigler, bleeding from shrapnel wounds, managed to bail out at 8,000 feet. Captured hours later by French resistance and turned over to Allied intelligence, his debriefing revealed the effectiveness of the tactic. "I saw only one Lightning," he told his interrogators. "I took every precaution, checked my 6 o'clock constantly. The second aircraft must have been positioned perfectly above and behind the sunline. I never saw it until it was firing. This is not an aircraft problem, this is a tactical problem. They hunt like wolves, one visible, one hidden, and they are very patient." The interrogation report was circulated to Luftwaffe commands with an urgent warning. P-38, Lightnings always operate in pairs. Visual contact with one Lightning means a second is present but unseen. Do not engage without numerical superiority and altitude advantage. The warning was largely ignored. German pilots, particularly veterans with multiple kills, believed their experience and superior aircraft handling would overcome American tactics. By April 1943, the P-38 groups had developed their tactics to devastating effectiveness. The paired hunting technique had evolved to include communication protocols, position discipline, and engagement rules that turned each two-ship element into a lethal machine. The communications were minimal, almost telepathic. Lead would call out targets, Wingman acknowledged with a single click of the radio button. When lead engaged, Wingman climbed 500 feet and offset 30 degrees, maintaining visual contact with both lead and surrounding airspace. Any threat to lead was met with immediate attack from the Wingman's superior position. Major Tommy Lynch, now commanding the 39th Fighter Squadron in the Pacific, had refined the tactic even further. He introduced the concept of the weave, where paired Lightnings would continuously cross over each other's flight path, each pilot constantly scanning the other's vulnerable 6 o'clock position. German pilots attempting to engage these formations found that attacking one Lightning meant immediately exposing themselves to fire from its partner. The effectiveness showed in the statistics. In March 1943, P-38 units claimed 47 German aircraft destroyed for the loss of 11 Lightnings, a 4.3 to 1 kill ratio. More significantly, of the 11 Lightnings lost, only 3 were destroyed while operating in proper pairs. The other 8 were either isolated by circumstance or victims of flak. The message was clear. Lightning pilots who maintained tactical discipline and stayed with their wingmen survived. Those who didn't died. The German response was to develop specific anti-Lightning tactics. Jagdgeschwader 26, commanded by the legendary Josef Priller, issued detailed instructions to its pilots in April 1943. The directive revealed growing German concern about the American twin-engine fighter. Special notice: tactics against P-38 Lightning. The American twin-engine fighter must be respected. It has excellent high-altitude performance, heavy armament concentrated in the nose, and good dive speed. Weaknesses: relatively poor rate of roll, large target profile, vulnerable when alone. Standard engagement tactics: attack only with altitude advantage of 2,000 meters or more. Attack from the rear quarter when possible to maximize target profile. Break off immediately if second lightning is observed. Do not pursue damaged lightnings below 4,000 meters. This is a common ambush tactic. Maximum burst time, 2 seconds. Conserve ammunition for certain kills. The lightning can absorb significant damage. The directive was tactically sound but revealed a critical German misunderstanding. Luftwaffe doctrine still emphasized individual pilot skill and aircraft performance. The concept that coordinated teamwork could overcome superior individual ability was foreign to their tactical thinking. They were about to pay for this blind spot with their best pilots. The demonstration came on April 18, 1943, in an operation that would become one of the most famous missions in aviation history. The mission to intercept and kill Admiral Yamamoto, architect of the Pearl Harbor attack. The mission was flown by P-38s from the 339th Fighter Squadron, and it showcased everything the Lightning could do when properly employed. The mission parameters were extreme. Yamamoto would be flying from Rabaul to Bougainville, a 315-mile flight over water. To intercept, P-38s would have to fly 435 miles at wave-top height to avoid radar detection, arrive exactly on time, execute the intercept, and return. No other American fighter had the range or speed for this mission. 16 P-38Gs, equipped with external drop tanks, launched from Guadalcanal at 7:25 a.m. Led by Major John Mitchell, they flew for over an hour at 50 feet above the water, navigating by dead reckoning toward an interception point calculated to precision. At 9:34 a.m., exactly as planned, they spotted 2 Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers escorted by 6 Zero fighters at 4,200 feet. Yamamoto was in the lead bomber. The attack was executed with textbook precision. 4 Lightnings, led by Captain Tom Lanphier and Lieutenant Rex Barber, climbed to engage. The remaining 12 Lightnings positioned to cut off the Zero escort. Lanphier and Barber operated as a perfect pair. Lanphier drew the attention of the Zero escort while Barber positioned for the kill. At 9:35 a.m., Barber opened fire on Yamamoto's bomber from 200 yards, his concentrated nose armament tearing through the Betty's fuel tanks and wing structure. The bomber, trailing fire, rolled left and crashed into the jungle. Yamamoto died on impact. The second bomber, attempting to escape, was destroyed minutes later by Lieutenant Jim McClanahan. All 6 Zeros were engaged by the covering Lightnings. One Zero was shot down, the others driven off. All P-38s returned safely. The mission demonstrated everything that made the Lightning exceptional. The range to fly over 1,000 miles round trip, the speed to intercept a target at a precisely calculated point, the firepower to destroy heavily built Japanese bombers with short bursts, and the tactical coordination that allowed 4 Lightnings to engage targets while 12 others provided perfect cover. News of Yamamoto's death devastated Japanese morale and electrified Allied forces. But for German intelligence tracking the mission, details through diplomatic channels, the implications were ominous. The Americans had demonstrated the ability to plan and execute precision strikes across enormous distances, using coordinated lightning formations. If they could do this to Japanese forces, they could do it to the Luftwaffe. In May 1943, P-38 operations over Europe intensified. The distinctive twin-boom fighters were appearing in growing numbers, and German pilots were learning through painful experience that engaging them required perfect execution. Any mistake was punished instantly by the second Lightning that was always present, always watching, always ready to pounce. Lieutenant Hans Joachim Kroschinski, a rising ace with 18 kills, encountered this reality on May 14, 1943, over Antwerp. Leading a flight of 4 Messerschmitt 109s, Kroschinski intercepted 6 P-38s, escorting B-17s. The Americans were at 26,000 feet. The Germans had altitude advantage at 28,000. Perfect setup for a bounce. Kroschinski led his flight into a diving attack, targeting the rear pair of Lightnings. Standard tactic: hit the stragglers, break off before the leaders could react. His wingman, Feldwebel Kurt Rapp, stayed in perfect formation, both Messerschmitts diving at 450 miles per hour. They opened fire simultaneously at 400 yards. The trailing Lightning shuddered under the impact of cannon shells and machine gun fire. Smoke poured from the left engine. The aircraft rolled left and began descending. Kill confirmed. The 2 Germans pulled up from their dive, energy high, ready to re-engage. That's when they discovered the trap. The 5 remaining Lightnings hadn't scattered or attempted to protect their damaged comrade. They had split into 2 pairs and 1 single, all 3 elements climbing at full power. Kroschinski, looking up, saw 2 Lightnings at his altitude already. Impossible. They'd been 2,000 feet below seconds ago. The damaged Lightning had been bait. The moment the Germans committed to their attack, the other Lightnings had dropped their external tanks and gone to maximum power, climbing at nearly 4,000 feet per minute. They'd given up 1 aircraft to position the others perfectly. Captain James Morris, leading the Lightning formation, opened fire on Kroschinski's wingman from 500 yards, 45-degree deflection. The concentrated nose armament created a cone of destruction that the Messerschmitt flew directly into. Rapp's fighter disintegrated. Wings separated from the fuselage, the engine tore free, the cockpit section tumbled toward earth-trailing fire. Kroschinski, horrified, broke left and dove. 2 more Lightnings were already diving on him, their twin booms distinctive against the bright sky. He pushed his Messerschmitt to its limits, reaching 500 miles per hour in the dive, pulling so hard at the bottom that his vision greyed. The Lightnings followed him down, matching his speed, their heavier weight allowing them to stay with him. Kroschinski levelled at 5,000 feet and ran for the French coast at full throttle. The Lightnings pursued for 30 miles before breaking off, their fuel situation critical. Kroschinski landed at Vitry with his aircraft damaged by ground fire and his nerves shattered. His combat report filed that evening revealed the depth of German concern. The American twin-engine fighter is more dangerous than previously assessed. High-altitude performance is exceptional. Climb rate after dropping external tanks matches or exceeds our fighters. Most critically, they coordinate their attacks with precision. The damaged aircraft was deliberate bait to draw us into a trap. We lost Feldwebel Rapp to this tactic. Recommendation: avoid engagement unless significant numerical and altitude advantage exists. The report joined hundreds of similar assessments flooding into Luftwaffe headquarters throughout mid-1943. The fork-tailed devil was earning its nickname. By June 1943, German pilots had developed genuine fear of the Lightning. The aircraft's appearance over the battlefield triggered immediate caution. Veterans who had fought since 1939 without hesitation now thought twice before engaging those distinctive twin booms. The fear was well-founded. P-38 pilots were becoming extraordinarily proficient at their coordinated tactics. New arrivals were immediately paired with experienced pilots and drilled relentlessly in mutual support techniques. The emphasis was always the same: never leave your wingman, never engage alone, trust your partner with your life. Lieutenant Robin Olds, who would later become one of America's most famous fighter pilots, arrived in England in May 1943, assigned to the 434th Fighter Squadron. His first combat mission, escorting B-24s to Wilhelmshaven, demonstrated the power of the paired hunting technique. Olds was wingman to Captain Archie Tower, a veteran with 4 kills. Their briefing was simple. "You stick to me like glue," Tower told him. "I don't care what happens. You watch my 6 and I'll watch yours. If I engage, you climb and cover. If someone jumps me, you kill them. Simple." The mission encountered heavy Luftwaffe opposition. Over 40 German fighters attacked the bomber formation. Tower, spotting a Messerschmitt 110 positioning for a rocket attack on the bombers, rolled in. Olds, following instructions, climbed 500 feet and offset, keeping Tower's Lightning in sight while scanning for threats. Tower's burst caught the Messerschmitt perfectly, 20mm shells exploding through the cockpit and engines. The German aircraft fell away burning. Olds, watching from above, saw a Focke-Wulf 190 diving on Tower from his 4 o'clock high position. Tower, focused on confirming his kill, hadn't seen the threat. Olds didn't radio a warning, no time. He rolled inverted, pulled through and dove at full throttle. The Lightning's acceleration was phenomenal. In 5 seconds he was doing 450 miles per hour. The Focke-Wulf pilot, concentrating on Tower, never looked back. Fatal mistake. Olds opened fire at 600 yards, his first combat shots, and walked the stream of fire toward the German fighter. The convergence was perfect. Cannon shells and machine gun bullets tore through the Focke-Wulf's engine cowling and cockpit. The German fighter's canopy flew off, and the aircraft rolled right and dove. No parachute. Olds pulled up, heart hammering, and rejoined Tower. The entire engagement had lasted 18 seconds. Tower's voice crackled over the radio, calm and matter-of-fact. "Good shooting, kid. That's how it works. You saved my life, I'll save yours. That's why we fly in pairs." It was a lesson Olds never forgot. 50 years later, as a retired brigadier general, he would tell interviewers that the paired tactical system developed for the P-38 was the most important combat lesson of his career. The aircraft was magnificent, he said, but the tactics made it deadly. One Lightning was dangerous, 2 working together were unstoppable. The Germans never adapted to this. Their whole system was based on individual aces, the lone wolf hunting for personal glory. We hunted in packs, and we hunted their wolves. By August 1943, the statistics were undeniable. P-38 units were achieving kill ratios of 5-to-1 or better. In high-altitude engagements above 25,000 feet, where the Lightning's performance peaked, the ratio approached 8-to-1. The 55th Fighter Group, arriving in England in September 1943, would eventually claim 303 enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, making it the top-scoring P-38 group in Europe. The human cost for Germany was staggering. Not just numbers, but quality. The Luftwaffe was losing experienced pilots, men with hundreds of combat hours and multiple kills, to coordinated attacks they couldn't counter. Each loss represented irreplaceable knowledge and training. The Americans, by contrast, were developing a system that made relatively inexperienced pilots effective through superior tactics and teamwork. Hauptmann Johannes Seifert, a Luftwaffe tactical instructor with 32 kills, analysed the problem in a September 1943 report that was widely circulated among fighter units. The American Lightning pilots are not individually superior to our pilots. Many are novices with limited combat experience, but their tactical system negates individual skill advantage. They never place themselves in vulnerable positions. They always have support. Their discipline is remarkable. German pilots seeking personal glory will engage targets of opportunity. American Lightning pilots ignore tempting targets if it means breaking formation. This discipline, combined with excellent aircraft performance and devastating firepower, creates an enemy that is extremely difficult to defeat. Recommended countermeasures are to attack only with significant numerical superiority, at least 3-to-1, approach from multiple directions to divide their attention, force them to separate by threatening the bombers they escort. Once separated, individual Lightnings can be engaged with conventional tactics. The problem with Seifert's recommendations was that by late 1943, achieving 3-to-1 numerical superiority was increasingly difficult. American fighter production was overwhelming German capacity. More P-38s arrived every week. The Luftwaffe, by contrast, was struggling to replace losses. The attrition was unsustainable. In October 1943, the P-38 demonstrated another capability that terrified German pilots: long-range penetration missions deep into Reich territory. On October 4th, P-38s escorted bombers to Frankfurt, over 400 miles into Germany. The Lightnings, equipped with drop tanks, could fly the entire mission and still have fuel for extended combat. This meant German fighters had no safe areas. The Lightnings could appear anywhere. The Frankfurt mission saw one of the most remarkable demonstrations of coordinated Lightning tactics. Major Gerald Johnson, leading the 63rd Fighter Squadron, encountered a formation of over 30 Messerschmitt 109s and Focke-Wulf 190s positioning to attack B-17s near the target. Johnson's squadron had 16 Lightnings. 2-to-1 odds against, but Johnson had altitude advantage. He split his squadron into 8 pairs and attacked. The Germans, seeing 16 Lightnings diving from above in perfect coordination, broke formation. Individual German pilots scattered, each seeking to use their aircraft's superior roll rate and turning ability to evade. It was exactly the wrong response. The Lightning pairs pursued individual targets methodically. Each pair worked the same pattern. Lead would engage, driving the German into a defensive turn. Wingman would position high and to the side, waiting for the German to reverse direction. When the German turned, trying to get on the lead Lightning's tail, he'd expose his top profile to the wingman perfectly positioned for a deflection shot. In 12 minutes of combat, Johnson's squadron claimed 11 German fighters destroyed with no losses. The Germans scattered completely, abandoning their attack on the bombers. The bomber formation continued to target and back without loss. Johnson's combat report noted the tactical effectiveness. German pilots appear trained to fight individually, not as coordinated elements. When facing paired Lightnings using mutual support tactics, they consistently make the same error. They focus on the aircraft they're engaging and ignore the second Lightning positioning for the kill. This pattern was observed in 9 of the 11 victories. Recommend continued emphasis on paired tactics and disciplined wingman positioning. The Luftwaffe's response was to develop specialized anti-Lightning units. In November 1943, elements of Jagdgeschwader 1 and Jagdgeschwader 11 received specific training in engaging P-38 formations. The tactics emphasized patience, numerical superiority, and attacking from multiple directions simultaneously to separate the Lightning pairs. On December 1, 1943, over Bremen, this specialized training was put to the test. 40 Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s, specifically briefed on anti-Lightning tactics, intercepted a formation of 32 P-38s from the 55th Fighter Group. The Germans attacked from 3 directions simultaneously, high, level, and low, attempting to overwhelm the Lightning's coordinated defense. The results were catastrophic for the Luftwaffe. The Lightning formation didn't panic or scatter. They executed a defensive maneuver developed specifically for multi-axis attacks. The formation split into flights of 4, each flight breaking toward the nearest threat. Within each flight, the 2 ship pairs maintained perfect discipline, each pilot covering his partner. The German pilots, expecting the Americans to scatter, found themselves facing coordinated counterattacks from multiple directions. The Lightning's nose-mounted armament meant every aircraft could fire effectively regardless of position. The Focke-Wulfs and Messerschmitts, with guns in the wings, needed precise positioning for convergence. In a swirling melee, the Lightning's advantage was overwhelming. The engagement lasted 18 minutes. The Lightnings claimed 17 German fighters destroyed. 3 P-38s were lost, all to mid-air collisions in the chaos of combat, not to enemy fire. The specialized anti-Lightning tactics had failed completely. Oberleutnant Anton Haeckel, leading one of the German formations and surviving with his aircraft heavily damaged, filed a devastating report. The American tactics are superior to ours. Their discipline under attack is remarkable. We achieved simultaneous attack from 3 directions, textbook execution, and they countered effectively. Their aircraft allows all-aspect attacks with concentrated firepower. Our wing-mounted guns require precise positioning. In a complex engagement, this is a critical disadvantage. Personnel assessment, We lost several experienced pilots, including Hauptmann Dorr and Oberfeldwebel Steinmann. These men had over 100 kills between them. The Americans lost no pilots. The 3 aircraft losses were collisions. This is an unsustainable exchange rate. Recommend defensive posture against Lightning formations unless overwhelming numerical superiority can be achieved. By January 1944, the P-38's reputation was firmly established. Luftwaffe pilots spoke of the fork-tailed devil with a mix of respect and fear. Intelligence reports tracked Lightning formations obsessively. Encounter reports were filed for every engagement, analysing American tactics and searching for weaknesses. The Germans found few exploitable vulnerabilities. The P-38H model arriving in early 1944 addressed many of the Lightning's earlier problems. The dive flap system was now standard, eliminating compressibility issues. Cockpit heating was improved, making high-altitude operations less miserable. Most significantly, the engines were upgraded to Allison V17 Rear 8991 models, producing 1,425 horsepower each with water injection. The performance increase was remarkable. Rate of climb improved to 3,200 feet per minute. Service ceiling increased to 44,000 feet. Maximum speed at altitude reached 414 miles per hour. The P-38H was faster, climbed better, and operated at higher altitudes than any German fighter in service. But the real evolution was tactical. By spring 1944, P-38 units had refined their paired hunting technique to an art form. The standard 2-ship element had become so effective that Lightning formations consistently outfought numerically superior German forces. Major Thomas Lynch, the architect of Lightning tactics, was killed in action over the Philippines on March 8, 1944, but his legacy lived on in every P-38 unit. The paired hunting system he developed had become doctrine, taught to every new pilot and practiced until it became instinctive. Lieutenant Colonel Jack Jenkins, commanding the 55th Fighter Group, described the system's effectiveness in a March 1944 letter to his wife. "We fly in pairs always. My wingman is Lieutenant Denson, and we've flown 30 missions. Together. I trust him more than anyone. We don't need to talk during combat. He knows where to position. I know he's watching my back. Yesterday we engaged 8 Germans. They scattered immediately when they saw us attack. We chased down 2. I got 1. Denson got the other. Perfect coordination. The Germans don't fight like this. They're individuals, each looking for personal victories. We're a team. Each victory belongs to both of us. It's not about individual glory, it's about getting home alive." The German pilot community struggled with this concept. Luftwaffe culture celebrated the ace, the individual warrior with dozens or hundreds of kills. The idea of shared credit, of deliberately subordinating personal opportunity for team effectiveness, was foreign to their tradition. This cultural difference would cost them dearly. The spring of 1944 saw the P-38 at the peak of its effectiveness in Europe. The aircraft was mature, the tactics proven, the pilots experienced. Lightning formations were wreaking havoc on Luftwaffe fighter strength. But perhaps more significantly, the P-38's long range made it the perfect aircraft for a new mission type that would devastate German pilot training. Fighter sweeps, offensive patrols deep into German-held territory, actively hunting Luftwaffe fighters. These missions, flown ahead of bomber formations, allowed P-38s to engage German fighters before they could assemble for bomber attacks. The Lightnings would sweep into an area, deliberately presenting themselves as targets, and then destroy any German fighters that rose to meet them. The psychological impact was profound. German fighters were being hunted in their own airspace. On April 24, 1944, 16 P-38s from the 338th Fighter Squadron flew a sweep over Munich. They encountered no opposition for the first hour. Then, climbing through 28,000 feet, they spotted a training formation below. 12 Messerschmitt 109s, flying in neat formation, practicing combat maneuvers, student pilots. The Lightning leader, Captain Ernest Fiebelkorn, hesitated. These were clearly novice pilots, probably on their 3rd or 4th training flight. Attacking them felt unsporting. Then he remembered the briefing. Every German pilot trained today is a German pilot will face tomorrow. The war isn't about sporting behaviour, it's about winning. He led his flight down. The German instructor, seeing the Lightnings diving from above, scattered his formation and transmitted an emergency call. But his students panicked. Instead of following their training, they broke in all directions, each pilot instinctively fleeing alone. The Lightnings, operating in disciplined pairs, methodically hunted them down. In 8 minutes, 9 of the 12 German aircraft were destroyed. The instructor and 2 students escaped by diving to ground level and running for a nearby airfield. None of the Lightnings were damaged. Fiebelkorn's combat report was clinical but revealed the one-sided nature of the engagement. Engaged 12 enemy aircraft in training formation over Munich. Enemy pilots displayed minimal combat capability. Standard paired tactics employed. 9 aircraft destroyed, 3 escaped. This engagement demonstrates the effectiveness of offensive sweeps targeting training units. German pilot quality continues to decline. The engagement over Munich was replicated dozens of times throughout spring 1944. P-38 sweeps were destroying German training units, killing instructors and students before they could gain combat experience. The Luftwaffe's pilot training pipeline, already stressed by fuel shortages and compressed training schedules, was hemorrhaging irreplaceable personnel. General Major Adolf Galland, commanding the Luftwaffe fighter force, understood the implications perfectly. In a May 1944 memo to Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, he laid out the crisis in stark terms. American fighter operations have evolved beyond escort duties to active hunting of our forces. The P-38 Lightning, with its exceptional range and performance, is particularly effective in this role. These aircraft penetrate deep into Reich territory, attacking not only operational units, but training formations. In April, we lost 127 pilots in training accidents and combat, including 18 instructors. This is unsustainable. We graduate approximately 200 new fighter pilots monthly. At current attrition rates, we are losing pilots faster than we can train them. The American advantage is not merely numerical. Their tactical system, emphasizing coordinated pair tactics and mutual support, allows relatively inexperienced pilots to fight effectively. Our system, based on individual pilot skill, requires extensive training we no longer have time to provide. The P-38 particularly exploits this vulnerability. The aircraft's concentrated nose armament and twin-engine redundancy make it forgiving of pilot error. A novice American pilot in a Lightning supported by an experienced wingman is more effective than an experienced German pilot flying alone in a superior handling fighter. Recommendation: shift to defensive posture. Preserve experienced pilots. Focus attacks on bombers. Avoid American fighter sweeps when possible. This is a war of attrition we cannot win through aerial combat alone. Göring's response was to order more aggressive tactics, the exact opposite of Galland's recommendation. The result was predictable. German losses increased. By June 1944, with the invasion of France imminent, the Luftwaffe was a shadow of its former strength. Experienced pilots were dead or exhausted. Training programs were producing pilots with barely 100 hours total flight time, thrust into combat against Americans with 400 hours of training and months of combat experience. The P-38 had become the symbol of American air superiority, those distinctive twin booms a harbinger of death. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, P-38s flew cover over the invasion beaches. Over 200 Lightnings from multiple groups created an aerial umbrella that German fighters couldn't penetrate. The few Luftwaffe aircraft that attempted to reach the beaches were destroyed before they could attack the vulnerable landing forces. Oberleutnant Josef Wurmheller, an ace with 102 victories, led a desperate attempt to reach the beaches at dawn. His formation of 8 Focke-Wulf 190s, flying at wave-top height to avoid radar, approached from the east. They were intercepted 30 miles from the beaches by 12 P-38s from the 370th Fighter Squadron. The Lightnings were stacked from sea level to 5,000 feet, positioned perfectly. Wurmheller, realizing he'd flown into a trap, tried to scatter his formation. Too late. The Lightnings attacked in pairs, each 2-ship element selecting a target and executing textbook-coordinated attacks. Wurmheller's wingman died in the first pass, his Focke-Wulf literally disintegrating under concentrated fire from 2 Lightnings attacking simultaneously from different angles. Wurmheller himself survived by jettisoning his external fuel tank and diving to the wavetops, running at full throttle. 3 other German pilots made it back to base. 4 did not. Not one German aircraft reached the invasion beaches. Wurmheller's combat report, filed with shaking hands, revealed the depth of German despair. The Americans own the sky. Their fighters are everywhere, positioned perfectly, coordinating their attacks with precision we cannot match. Over the beaches, the sky was filled with twin-engine fighters at all altitudes. They were waiting for us. We never had a chance. I have 102 victories. I have fought on every front. I have never been as frightened as I was today. Those twin-boom fighters hunt in packs, and they are merciless. We lost good men, experienced pilots, and achieved nothing. The mission was suicide. The Germans would not seriously challenge Allied air superiority over France again. The period from June to August 1944 saw P-38's transition increasingly to ground attack roles. The Lightning's heavy armament and structural strength made it an excellent fighter bomber. But even in this role, the paired hunting technique remained critical. Ground attack missions were the most dangerous sorties in the war. Flying low and slow to accurately deliver bombs and rockets, aircraft were vulnerable to ground fire. German flak was deadly, and Luftwaffe fighters specifically hunted for aircraft during attack runs when they were most vulnerable. The Lightning pairs adapted their tactics. During ground attack runs, one aircraft would deliver ordnance while its partner remained high, providing top cover and ready to suppress ground fire or engage enemy fighters. The roles would then reverse, ensuring continuous mutual support. Captain Arthur Hayden, flying with the 302nd Fighter Squadron, described the system in a July 1944 interview. "My wingman is Lieutenant Crosby. When I'm making an attack run, he's at 3,000 feet covering me. If flak starts firing, he'll strafe the position. If enemy fighters show up, he engages immediately while I complete my run and climb back up. Then I cover him while he attacks. We've flown 45 missions together this way. Neither of us has been hit. The system works because we trust each other completely." The ground attack missions revealed another Lightning advantage: the aircraft's toughness. Twin engines meant redundancy. Lose one engine to flak and you could still make it home. The airframe could absorb tremendous damage and keep flying. Multiple P-38s returned from missions with one engine shot out, massive holes in wings and fuselage, control surfaces partially destroyed yet still flyable. German single-engine fighters, suffering similar damage, rarely made it home. Lieutenant Colonel J.T. Robbins, commanding the 80th Fighter Squadron in the Pacific, lost his entire left boom to anti-aircraft fire during a low-level attack on September 12, 1944. The explosion severed the boom at the wing root, taking the left engine, propeller and tail surface with it. The Lightning, now flying with one engine and one tail, should have been uncontrollable. Robbins, through extraordinary skill and the Lightning's inherent stability, managed to keep it flying. He climbed to 8,000 feet, trimmed the aircraft as best he could, and flew 240 miles back to base on one engine. The landing approach was terrifying. The aircraft wanted to roll left constantly, requiring full right aileron and rudder just to maintain wings-level flight. Robbins touched down at 140 miles per hour, faster than normal, and used every foot of the runway before stopping. The aircraft was a write-off, but Robbins walked away. His wingman, Lieutenant Robert de Haven, had escorted him the entire way home, talking him through the emergency procedures and ready to call rescue if Robbins had to bail out. After landing, Robbins told the base commander, "I stayed with the airplane because I knew de Haven was with me. If I'd been alone, I would have bailed out over the target area, but knowing he was there watching my six guiding me home, I had the confidence to try to save the aircraft." That's what the pair system does. It's not just tactics, it's psychological. You're never alone. This psychological element, the confidence that came from knowing your wingman was always present, was perhaps the paired system's greatest contribution. It allowed pilots to take calculated risks, to press attacks, to stay in fights they might otherwise have fled, because they knew their partner was covering them. By autumn 1944, the P-38's role in Europe was evolving. The P-51 Mustang, with even better high-altitude performance and longer range, was taking over bomber escort duties. But the Lightning remained supreme in the ground attack role and in the tactical reconnaissance mission. The F-5 variant, a photo reconnaissance version of the Lightning, used its speed and altitude capability to photograph German positions deep in enemy territory. These missions were particularly dangerous. Reconnaissance aircraft couldn't fight back. They could only evade. But F-5 pilots discovered that flying in pairs, even reconnaissance aircraft could defend themselves effectively. On October 3, 1944, two F-5s from the 27th Photo Reconnaissance Squadron were photographing rail yards near Frankfurt when they were jumped by 4 Messerschmitt 109s. The F-5s had no armament, their gun positions filled with cameras. By doctrine, they should have run. Instead, the lead pilot, Captain James Poindexter, radioed his wingman, "Standard evasion, pattern 3. The 2 F-5s began executing a defensive weave, crossing over each other's flight path every 15 seconds. The Messerschmitts trying to line up shots found themselves constantly facing an F-5, in a position to observe their approach. Each time a German closed on one F-5, the other would turn toward the attacker, forcing the German to break off or risk a collision. The 2 unarmed reconnaissance aircraft held off 4 fighters for 12 minutes, through coordination alone. Finally, a flight of P-47 Thunderbolts arrived, drawn by the radio calls. The Messerschmitts fled. Both F-5s returned with their photographs. The mission demonstrated that the paired tactical system worked, even when the aircraft had no weapons. The coordination and mutual support were enough to negate numerical superiority. The final evolution of Lightning tactics in Europe came in early 1945 with the introduction of pathfinding techniques. Experienced Lightning pairs would fly ahead of ground attack formations, identifying targets and marking them with smoke rockets. The following aircraft would then attack the marked targets with bombs and napalm. This system allowed less experienced pilots to attack effectively without exposing themselves to the danger of low-level target searching. The pathfinding Lightnings, always operating in pairs, would enter heavily defended areas at high speed and low altitude. One aircraft would mark the target while the second suppressed ground fire and watched for enemy fighters. The coordination required was extraordinary, but Lightning pairs had been training together for months or years. The system worked with brutal efficiency. By March 1945, German ground commanders dreaded clear weather. Clear skies meant Lightning pathfinders would arrive, followed by waves of fighter bombers that would systematically destroy anything that moved. Oberst Hans-Ulrich Rudel, Germany's most decorated pilot, encountered Lightning pathfinders on March 19, 1945, while attacking Soviet armour on the Eastern Front. Rudel, flying a Stuka dive bomber, spotted 2 P-38s at low altitude marking targets ahead of a larger formation. Believing them vulnerable during their attack run, Rudel positioned for an attack. It was a nearly fatal error. The moment Rudel committed, the second Lightning broke off its marking run and came after him with remarkable aggression. Rudel, in a slow Stuka, had no chance in a turning fight. He survived only by diving to ground level and using his aircraft's excellent low-speed handling to maneuver between trees and buildings where the faster Lightning couldn't follow. Even then, the P-38 pursued him for 20 miles before breaking off. Rudel later wrote in his diary, "The American twin-engine fighters are the most dangerous aircraft I have encountered. They hunt in pairs with perfect coordination. Even during ground attack missions when they should be vulnerable, they protect each other. Today I attacked what I thought was an easy target and nearly died. These are not ordinary pilots. These are hunters, and they are very, very good." As the war in Europe entered its final weeks, the statistical record of P-38 operations told the story of complete American air superiority. The 8th Air Force P-38 groups had claimed over 900 German aircraft destroyed in aerial combat. The loss rate for Lightnings operating in proper pairs remained consistently below 15%, remarkable for fighter-bomber operations in heavily defended airspace. But perhaps more significant than the numbers was the psychological impact. German pilots had learned to fear the fork-tailed devil. The sight of those distinctive twin booms triggered immediate caution. Luftwaffe combat reports from 1945 consistently advised avoiding engagement with P-38 formations unless absolutely necessary. The aircraft that German pilots had mocked in 1943 as ungainly and vulnerable had become the symbol of American tactical superiority. In April 1945, as German resistance collapsed, Lightning units transitioned to ground support for advancing Allied armies and interdiction missions against fleeing German forces. The paired hunting technique proved equally effective against ground targets. 2 Lightnings working together could destroy an entire convoy, one aircraft suppressing return fire while the other attacked, then reversing roles. On April 16, 1945, 4 days before Hitler's suicide, 2 P-38s from the 408th Fighter Squadron encountered what may have been one of the last Luftwaffe training flights of the war. 6 Messerschmitt 109s, flying in loose formation at 8,000 feet over Bavaria, practicing basic fighter maneuvers. Captain Robert Vrillicus, leading the Lightning pair, recognized them as students immediately. The formation was too precise, too mechanical. These were novice pilots flying by instruction, not combat veterans. Vrillicus faced the same decision Captain Feeblecorn had faced a year earlier. These were student pilots, barely trained, no threat. Attacking them seemed unnecessarily brutal with the war clearly ending. Then Vrillicus remembered every friend he'd lost, every bomber crew that had died because German fighters got through the escort screen, every soldier killed by Luftwaffe ground attacks. He remembered that mercy in war often meant prolonging the conflict. He led his wingman into the attack. The engagement lasted 4 minutes. All 6 German aircraft were destroyed. None of the pilots survived. Vrillicus filed his combat report with no emotion. Engaged 6 enemy aircraft in training formation. Enemy pilots displayed no combat capability. Standard paired tactics employed. 6 aircraft destroyed. Last aerial combat for this pilot. The war in Europe ended 3 weeks later. The final accounting of P-38 operations in Europe revealed the devastating effectiveness of the paired hunting system. In 2 years of combat, Lightning units had maintained kill ratios consistently above 4-1, with some squadrons achieving ratios of 8-1. More significantly, Lightnings operating in proper pairs, where both aircraft survived to file reports, achieved kill ratios of nearly 10-1. The lesson was clear. The coordinated pair was more than twice as effective as the sum of 2 individual aircraft. The system where each pilot covered his partner, where coordination was more important than individual glory, where team success mattered more than personal credit, had proven decisively superior to the German ace system. Post-war interviews with surviving Luftwaffe pilots revealed universal respect for Lightning tactics. General Lieutenant Adolf Garland, after the war, called the P-38's paired hunting system the most significant tactical innovation of the air war. Major Gunther Rall, third highest scoring ace of all time with 275 victories, said in a 1985 interview, "The Lightning taught us that our whole approach to fighter combat was flawed. We trained individuals, the Americans trained teams. One exceptional pilot can win battles, but coordinated teams win wars. We had better individual pilots, better handling aircraft in some respects, but we lost because we never adapted to their team tactics." Lieutenant Colonel Johannes Steinhoff, who survived the war to become a post-war Luftwaffe commander, was even more direct. "The fork-tailed devil was the name we gave the P-38, and it was accurate. Not because the aircraft was invincible, but because of how they flew them. Always in pairs, always coordinated, always covering each other. You couldn't exploit individual mistakes because they didn't make individual mistakes. They made team decisions. If you attacked one, you faced 2. If you tried to separate them, they refused to be separated. It was like fighting an opponent with perfect discipline and no ego. Terrifying." The P-38 Lightning's combat record in the Pacific was even more impressive than in Europe. Operating across vast oceanic distances, the Lightning's range and twin-engine redundancy made it the dominant fighter of the Pacific theater. Major Richard Bong, America's highest-scoring ace with 40 victories all in P-38s, attributed his success directly to the paired hunting system. In a 1944 interview, shortly before his death in a test flight accident, Bong explained his tactics. "I never fought alone. Never. Every mission, I flew with a wingman and we worked as a team. My job was to get kills. His job was to keep me alive. When I was focused on a target, he was watching for threats. When he called a break, I broke immediately, no questions. Trust is everything. The Japanese pilots were excellent, brave, skilled, but they fought as individuals looking for personal glory. We fought as pairs, looking for victories. My 40 kills belong as much to my wingmen as to me. They kept me alive long enough to become an ace." Major Thomas Maguire, the second highest scoring American ace with 38 victories, also in P-38s, developed variations on the paired hunting technique specifically adapted to Japanese tactics. Maguire's innovations included altitude separation, where the Lightning pair would maintain a 2,000-foot vertical separation, allowing them to cover a larger volume of airspace and prevent Japanese fighters from achieving altitude advantage. Maguire was killed in action in January 1945, ironically because he broke his own tactical rules. Leading a flight of 4 P-38s, he engaged a lone Japanese fighter at low altitude without his wingman in position. The Japanese pilot, Sergeant Akira Sugimoto, an experienced ace, maneuvered Maguire into a low-speed turning fight. Maguire's Lightning stalled during a hard turn and crashed. He died because he violated the fundamental principle of Lightning tactics: never fight alone. The incident became a cautionary tale in P-38 units. The second highest-scoring ace in American history died because he forgot the basic lesson. Stay with your wingman. The coordination isn't optional, it's survival. By war's end, the P-38 Lightning had compiled a combat record unmatched by any other aircraft in American service. Over 10,000 enemy aircraft claimed destroyed, hundreds of ships sunk, thousands of ground targets destroyed. But the aircraft's greatest contribution wasn't the destruction it inflicted. It was the tactical revolution it enabled. The paired hunting system developed for the P-38 became the foundation of fighter tactics for the next 50 years. The Finger Four formation, where 4 aircraft operate as 2 mutually supporting pairs, became standard in every air force worldwide. The concept that wingmen exist to protect leads, not to score personal victories, transformed fighter operations. The understanding that coordination and mutual support multiply effectiveness revolutionized aerial warfare. Modern fighter tactics, with their emphasis on situational awareness, mutual support and coordinated attacks, trace directly back to the lessons learned by P-38 pilots hunting German fighters over Europe in 1943 and 1944. The advanced tactics used by F-15 and F-16 pilots in later conflicts were refinements of concepts developed by men like Tommy Lynch, Gerald Johnson, and Jack Jenkins 70 years earlier. At the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio, a restored P-38L sits in the World War II gallery. Its twin booms gleam under museum lighting, the distinctive profile instantly recognizable. The placard describes specifications, combat record, notable pilots. But the real story is told by a framed document on the nearby wall. It's a Luftwaffe intelligence report from April 1945, captured when Allied forces overran a German headquarters. The report analyzes American fighter tactics and includes this assessment of the P-38. The American Lightning is the most dangerous fighter in the Allied arsenal, not because of superior performance. We have fighters that can match it in certain parameters, but because of how it is employed. American pilots never fight alone. They operate in coordinated pairs with discipline we cannot match. Our pilots, trained in individual combat, are consistently outfought by American teams. The Lightning's concentrated nose armament makes it effective at all aspects and ranges. Its twin engines provide redundancy our single-engine fighters cannot match. Most critically, American tactical doctrine emphasizes mutual support over individual achievement. A lone Lightning will refuse combat and withdraw to rejoin its partner. American pilots will not accept unfavorable engagements, showing patience and discipline our pilots lack. Recommended counter tactics: avoid engagement with Lightning formations. If engagement is unavoidable, attack only with significant numerical superiority and attempt to separate the pairs. Once separated, individual Lightnings can be engaged with conventional tactics. However, separating them is extremely difficult as they are trained to maintain formation at all costs. Assessment: the Lightning represents American tactical philosophy perfectly. Overwhelming firepower, redundant systems, coordinated team tactics, and patience to wait for advantageous engagement. This is not an aircraft problem, it is a systemic problem. We cannot match American tactical doctrine with our current training and operational methods. Below the German assessment is a handwritten note added by an American intelligence officer who processed the captured documents. They figured it out too late. The paired hunting system developed by P-38 pilots won the air war. Not because we had better aircraft, though the Lightning was excellent. Not because we had braver pilots, they were as brave as anyone. We won because we understood that 2 pilots working together are worth more than 3 fighting alone. We won because we taught teamwork while they taught individual glory. We won because when we sent pilots into combat, we sent them in pairs, and we trained them to value their wingman's life more than their own glory. The fork-tailed devil was the aircraft, but the system was the weapon. The exhibition includes video interviews with P-38 pilots and their opponents, recorded decades after the war. In one particularly poignant segment, a former Luftwaffe pilot, Oberstleutnant Heinz Knoak, sits beside Robin Olds, the American ace who flew P-38s before transitioning to P-51s. Noak speaks slowly, his English heavily accented. I remember the first time I saw the Lightning, April 1943, over the Channel. I thought it was ugly, this twin-boom fighter. I thought the Americans did not know how to design aircraft. I was wrong about many things. Olds responds quietly. We heard you guys called it the fork-tailed devil. Noak nods. Yes, because it came from two directions at once. You could never face just one Lightning. There was always another, above, behind, to the side. We learned this slowly through many losses. Your system was better than ours. We had aces, individuals with 100, 200 kills. You had teams. In the end, teams won. The interviewer asks Noak what he remembers most about fighting P-38s. The veteran pilot is quiet for a long moment. The sound, he finally says. The sound of those engines, two Allisons not synchronized. They made a distinctive sound. You could hear them from far away. When you heard that sound, you knew the fork-tailed devil was hunting, and you knew it was not hunting alone. The camera holds on both men, former enemies, now old men sharing memories of youth and war. Olds reaches over and shakes Noak's hand. The German pilot, tears in his eyes, says quietly, "We mocked your aircraft in 1943. By 1945, we feared it. Not because of what it was, but because of how you flew it. Together. Always together." The screen fades to black and the final statistics appear. P-38 Lightning combat record World War II. Total produced 10,037 aircraft. Total enemy aircraft destroyed. Aerial combat 1,700 plus confirmed. Kill ratio 4.8 to 1 overall, 9.7 to 1 when operating in coordinated pairs. Notable achievements: longest fighter mission of the war, 200 miles to intercept Admiral Yamamoto. Highest scoring American ace in history, Major Richard Bong, 40 victories, all in P-38s. Top scoring P-38 group, 55th Fighter Group, 3-3 aerial victories. The Lightning entered combat as an experiment, a radical twin-engine fighter that conventional wisdom said couldn't succeed. German pilots mocked its appearance, questioned its design, doubted its effectiveness. They were still mocking when the first Lightnings arrived in Europe in 1942, ungainly aircraft flown by inexperienced pilots. They stopped mocking in 1943 when American pilots learned to hunt in pairs. They started fearing in 1944 when those pairs became aerial wolf packs that owned the European skies. By 1945, the mockery was gone, replaced by respect, fear, and the understanding that they had faced something revolutionary. Not just an aircraft, but a complete tactical system that made coordination more important than the individual skill. The P-38 Lightning, the fork-tailed devil, the twin-boom fighter that shouldn't have worked, became the weapon that taught the world how modern fighters should be flown. In pairs, always in pairs, each pilot trusting his life to his wingman, each team worth more than the sum of its parts. The German pilots who survived learned this lesson. The ones who didn't learned it too late. The sky remembers them all, the hunters and the hunted, the pairs and the individuals, the victors and the vanquished. But history remembers the lesson. In aerial warfare, as in life, we are stronger together than alone. The fork-tailed devil proved it, one coordinated pair at a time, until the sky over Europe belonged to America.